Voting is not voluntary, and neither is campaigning for candidates running for office in government. That may be voluntary for some people, but for others it's not. I know it sounds like a strange statement, but I think it's true. Let me show you why I think that. Consider an example where two people more powerful than you approach you. And both of these people have the power to dominate you. They're both stronger than you. One of them hands you a voting ballot and asks you to vote for which one you prefer to dominate you. I think a lot of anarchists would agree that that's a good analogy of democratic government. Now assume that you believe that one of these people would be more oppressive than the other once they got in power. Now, I've seen some anarchists say that they choose not to vote because they think it's granting someone the permission to rule over them. And they may see it as immoral or inconsistent with being an anarchist. They think that voting is voluntary. I think that's their mistake. I think they're wrong. It's not voluntary for them if they choose to vote. Even if they choose to vote, it's not voluntary. If you vote for the less authoritarian person to rule over you, it doesn't mean you're doing this voluntarily. Now, at least this is not what is normally meant by voluntary. For an act to be voluntary, it has to be an act that you would not perform if it weren't that you were under coercion or the threat of coercion, threat of physical force from another person. For example, if a thief comes to you with a gun and he tells you to give him your money or he'll shoot you, you're free to not give him your money. You actually are free to give him your money or not give him your money. If you don't give him your money, you'll be shot. But you are free to make that choice because he's not physically holding you and putting your hand in your pocket and making you hand the wallet to him. He's giving you this choice of having the money, of giving him your money, or to be shot. But would you say if you gave him the money that it was a voluntary choice? I don't think you would. That's not what we normally mean by voluntary. What is normally meant by voluntary is that it's an act done without the threat of physical force or actual physical force. So this is the same kind of situation with voting. Someone in government is going to rule over you. If you vote in order to defend yourself, you're freely choosing to vote, but it's not voluntary. It's not morally voluntary. Some philosophers use the term morally voluntary to distinguish acts that are done that you would do without the threat of coercion from acts that are voluntary that you do when there's a threat of coercion. So voting is not voluntary. It's not morally voluntary. It's not something you would do if there was not the threat of greater coercion against you, if you didn't make the choice to help one person get in office over the other. So, any of you anarchists who feel guilty about voting or campaigning for someone running for office, or think that it's inconsistent with being an anarchist, ought to realize that it's not voluntary. You're coerced to vote. You're coerced to go out campaigning for candidates, for going out and holding signs to help someone get elected in office. It's not a voluntary act. It's coerced. It's self-defense. So go ahead and vote and campaign for people with a clear conscience. It's not a voluntary act. It's coerced. So you shouldn't feel guilty for trying to defend what freedom you have left by whatever means you have available. I think this is the same kind of point that the 19th century individualist anarchist Lysander Spooner was trying to make in a part of No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority. In that he writes, quote, "In truth, in the case of individuals, their actual voting is not to be taken as proof of consent. On the contrary, it is to be considered that, without his consent, having ever been asked, a man finds himself environed by a government that he cannot resist, a government that forces him to pay money, render service, and forgoes the exercise of many of his natural rights under peril of weighty punishments. He sees, too, that other men practice this tyranny over him by the use of the ballot. He sees further that if he will but use the ballot himself, he has some chance of relieving himself from this tyranny of others, or by subjecting them to his own. In short, he finds himself, without his consent, so situated that, if he uses the ballot, he may become a master. If he doesn't use it, he must become a slave. His case is analogous to that of a man who has been forced into battle, where he must either kill others or be killed himself. Because to save his own life in battle, a man attempts to take the lives of his opponents, it is not to be inferred that the battle is one of his own choosing. Neither in contests with the ballot, which is a mere substitute for a bullet, because as his only chance of self-preservation, a man uses a ballot, is it to be inferred that the contest is one to which he voluntarily entered, or that he voluntarily set up all his own natural rights as a stake against those of others, to be lost or won by the mere power of numbers. Doubtless, the most miserable of men, under the most oppressive government in the world, if allowed the ballot, would use it, if they could see any chance of ameliorating their condition. But it would not, therefore, be a legitimate inference that the government itself that crushes them was one which they had voluntarily set up or even consented to.